Welcome to Women Winning Divorce. I am your host, Heather Quick. I am an attorney, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Florida Women's Law Group, the only divorce firm for women by women. I love thinking big, thinking outside the box, creating creative solutions for women, and empowering women to win in all aspects of their life. Our approach at Florida Women's Law Group is to provide women with a strategy to not only achieve their objectives, but win at life. I believe that what may show up as adversity is simply an opportunity to change and improve your life. In each episode, I sit down with innovative professionals and leaders who are focused on how you can be your best self before, during, and after divorce. In these conversations, we are looking at how women can win at life. I have the unique opportunity to meet women when they are at a transition period of life. But that is only the beginning to becoming your best self and winning at life on your terms. With our guests, we enjoy the opportunity to explore ways all women can win and enhance their life, no matter where they are in their journey. Because divorce is just a point in life, not the end and not what defines you, rather a catalyst for your growth.
Welcome to this week's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney of Florida Women's Law Group. Today, I am joined by Mary Joye, counselor, author, and Florida Court Family Law Mediator. Welcome to the show, Mary.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me. One of my favorite subjects. I love speaking to attorneys to help people in mental health. Believe it or not, they go together.
Oh, girl, you are so true. It's so true what you say. I think there's probably not an episode that goes by where it doesn't come up but you need to see a counselor, right? Like on so many issues that yes, it should work in tandem more often than it does, but we really try to do that for sure.
Yes.
Now, okay, interesting tidbit for our listeners who I know are going to be so excited to hear what you have to say today, but you didn't start out your career as a mental health professional, Mary, did you?
Oh, no. My father was a psychiatrist, so I rebelled like any good teenager would.
And I mean, come on, seriously, rebelling, singer-songwriter in Nashville? That's pretty impressive.
I know I had to prove myself, but I went to college. I was a theater major. Then I worked on the KISS tour for 3 years as a makeup and wardrobe assistant. So yes, I was proving a point.
I bet you have some skills. Like that's
and so yes, I was a lighting major. They just said girls don't do light. So that was back in the 70s, right? Late 70s, early 80s. So I accepted it and it taught me a lot. It got me to Nashville. And yes, I was a singer-songwriter in Nashville for a very long time. And I enjoyed it. I loved it. Still do write things occasionally.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. I love that. And I think, when we have different, the more opportunities you have to interact with other people when you're in a different role, it brings just a whole nother level of understanding and perspective. Obviously it's the career that you do now, which is therapist and mediator, right?
Yes. And, I've said before that, when I was rebelling against my dad, I said, I get people in touch with their feelings as a songwriter. And that's what you do as a psychiatrist. And now the segue to me it wasn't such a big change because I used to work for my dad, but not only that, I get people in touch with their feelings as a counselor. And that's why we call it legal counsel, because you all are called counselors too. You're legal counsel. I refer people to legal counsel all the time. Sometimes I'll say, you need to go to a lawyer to see if you need a lawyer.
Yes, because you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. You need to find out.
You have to find out. Absolutely. Well, this week we are discussing financial abuse, what it is, what it can look like, and how to escape. So this is some good stuff we got going on today, for sure.
Oh yes, money and emotions are so intertwined, especially in divorce. It's the only way the court has to make amends or to make people be able to go on with their life. As you know, you help them do it.
Absolutely. And it is, and one of the things, and I think it was on one episode, I can't keep them straight now, but when talking about money, there are a lot of emotions that are attached to it anyway, that really come from your upbringing, your belief system, so many things. And there's very rarely a discussion about those things prior to getting married, and how you view money, how you treat money, what your experience with money is. And So most people, I certainly, my husband and I didn't have that conversation. We figured a lot of things out by trial and error, which I think most people do. And the ones
Yes.
that don't work end up, in front of me and you.
Yes. Yes. The number one reason for divorce is money issues. Money infidelity sometimes is harder to retrieve a marriage from than other infidelity. And it's funny because I just wrote, Daily Ohm just asked me, because I write for dailyohm.com, and they asked me to write a divorce course. And I had to address the financial stuff. I said, because they said, what makes divorce different than a breakup? And I said, attorneys and money and children and
Right.
time sharing. It's a totally different issue than just to break up and you load a U-Haul or call a mover and you go on with your life. It's very, very different. It's a legal contract you're breaking.
That is correct. And that legal contract is you're subject to the state that you live in.
Yes.
So, again, which I know before the show, a little bit about prenups was coming up, that conversation, because you have and we've had a show on that. That's where you have the opportunity to determine how it will go. But if you don't do that, then you are subject to the state for your divorce.
Yes, you are. That's what I love being a mediator. I tell people in mediation, I have to be neutral, but I tell them this is your opportunity to override the laws of the state of whatever that you're in, because if you agree, you have just overridden anything in the law. The judge will not have to put a gavel to it. You're making your own decision. So if they can somehow put the anger down and look for common ground instead of the adversarial things, it's really helpful. If you can even make partial agreements, it's helpful.
Indeed, it is. And which, as we'll get into, but that can sometimes always be. That's why we need a mediator in addition to lawyers, right? Because
Yes.
it does. It takes a lot of people to help two folks divorcing sometimes get through the whole thing. But
Yes.
since we're talking about financial abuse today, Mary, could you just please give our listeners a quick overview, a definition of financial?
Well, financial abuse is when somebody there's kind of it's kind of a spectrum actually. People are either depriving you of something or using you for something. So depriving you of money, services, finances, homes, cars, whatever they want, or they're using you for what you have. So financial abuse can look very, very different. It might not even feel like financial abuse for a while. And as you know, a legal term is undue influence. So there's a lot of gray area to what financial abuse is. But basically, it's somebody trying to control you or your finances or your life with finances. They're trying to control your finances or trying to control your life with finances. Hopefully that makes sense there.
Well, it does to me. And I think as we go through, so listeners, hang in there, because the more we get into it, I know that it will. But I mean, what's really interesting to me, for sure, in this area, financial abuse is the most common form of abuse in a marriage, but really is the least acknowledged. Wouldn't you agree?
I absolutely agree because it is a huge component of what we call in our business a trauma bond. And a trauma bond, without giving you a neuroscience lecture, this is why some, especially in narcissistic abuse or sociopathic abuse, that person that's trauma bonding you may have love bombed you with cars. I always say they'll give you a Rose or a Rolls Royce, whatever they can afford. They might love bomb you with gifts and money, and all of a sudden they take that away from you. So that's often part of a trauma bond, and it creates this a physiological hook at when you feel good and you're getting, whether it's emotional or financial, when you're getting from another person, the narcissist or the sociopath, you get adrenaline and dopamine and lovely, norepinephrine. And actually the
Right. So you
adrenaline
feel
also,
good, right? So you're like,
yes, you
oh,
feel
I love
great. And
it.
then when they
So happy.
withdraw it or use it or use up everything you have, which is what happened to me, that means just use it all. Then you get cortisol and bad adrenaline, not the kind that gives you energy, but the kind that just depletes you and puts you in adrenal fatigue. You just go into complete and utter shock. And so you're in a trauma bond trying to figure out what happened. Sometimes they call it crazy making behavior or gaslighting. I prefer to call it brainwashing. And many times find it, the whole term gaslighting came from somebody trying to financially abuse someone. It was in a movie, but it
Right.
was a person trying to financially abuse someone and create undue influence through a trauma bond.
And
Serious stuff.
and it is, but it's just, we were talking about it, but I don't think that we hear enough about it.
No.
And certainly it is not recognized and acknowledged in the court system to at all, really.
No,
As
not at all.
Not at all. It's just
No.
not, is it? And it's really is serious because of, as we get into it, we'll talk more, but I mean, it sometimes do you see financial abuse as an element or a piece of domestic violence as well?
It's a huge piece. That is a trauma bond is exactly what domestic violence is. This is why when people say, why does he or she stay? They stay because they're actually addicted. They're trying to believe the good person is real and the bad one is somebody that isn't, but what they have it is skewed. It's actually a form of pathological altruism, which Barbara Oakley was a psychologist that termed it that. You believe the best and the worst of people, and financial abusers are very good at it. Let's not forget where the word con man comes from. It comes from confidence man. So they gain your confidence and then they take it away. But they wait until and they're certain they fully have it. And you're sending them signals with mirror neurons and all kind of neuroscience that they may not know why they're doing what they're doing, but they know what they're doing. They know exactly how to hook you. They really, really do. So a trauma bond is serious. And I hope people kind of Google that because it's not, it's not something we need to talk about in financial abuse, but it is a component of how a trauma
Okay.
bond is created.
Because I was going to ask you, so it's a component of how this cycle, how this relationship continues. Is that right? Is that
Yes.
a way
I
to
mean,
say
a
it?
lot of times you hear this all the time. Someone will get battered or mistreated or verbally berated, and then the person, the batterer or the verbal abuser shows up with a brand new car and said, "I'm so sorry." Well, that happens over and over and over, but you can't break a pattern until you see it, and you can't see it until you have it. So we blame the victim in our society so often, but how can a victim know they're a victim when they're just being brainwashed slowly and methodically by someone who's really, really good at it? So a lot of states are changing some of the domestic violence laws that they're giving them a longer statute of limitations to report it to get over the PTSD symptoms. Because battered woman syndrome, I kind of don't like it that they put a gender to it because men can have it happen too. But it's really just PTSD. It's not even in our diagnostic manual. It's PTSD. It's post-traumatic stress disorder.
And how often do you see that when there has been the history of the abuse and neglect?
Almost always. I mean, almost always is part of the equation. I'm trying to think of times when it wasn't. Um, but it's almost all the time. Uh, People stay together because of money. Sometimes I see they own businesses together. Well, I hear this a lot. I can't get a divorce. We own a business together. I can't get a divorce because I don't have any money. I can't get a divorce because he took all my money, or I can't get a divorce because we own a house together that then the market's upside down. We're upside down on our mortgage. And do you hear the pain in that? They're trapped by something that goes in a bank. They're emotionally and
Right.
and
Yeah.
and trapped.
And so let's, like, I think in a lot of marriages, just based on my experience and, talking to women, for so many years going through the divorce process, that it's not uncommon that, one person, we all have to divvy up the duties to run a
Mhm.
household,
Yes.
and family and business. And so it's not uncommon for one spouse to generally handle the bills and finances,
Mhm.
right? But let's like really dig into this so that our listeners understand, because this is different. This isn't that, right? This is
No, it's
this
not that.
whole
That's a
other
person that's
thing.
just good at it and doing it, you
And
know?
doing it because you're taking care
Y
of something else. And sometimes it's not the
Yes.
person earning it
Right.
who is almost controlling it. And I
Yes.
have had experience, through this practice where even women were the earner. However, there was this control exerted over the money. It was a surprise to me, but that I think is common. It's been
Is
more than once.
very common. In fact, it's very, very, very common, and it's also common that the person controlling the finances won't give you the passwords to the accounts. I mean, if they pass away, you don't even know where your bank account is. They're handing you cash like a child's allowance, and they're
Right.
treating you like a child. It is a horrible form of abuse. It's diminishing you. There's a term called infantilizing, and I love that term, and it means infant. They're treating you like an infant or a child, like you can't touch the bank account. You don't know anything about that. I can't trust you with credit cards. I take care of all that. Here's $500 this week. You can spend that and no more. So that other person, if something happens, they don't know where anything is. They could be taking out loans in that person's name.
Right.
And in a lot of states that debt to asset ratio, there's no way that a state's going to say, well, you allowed it. You know, some states say, well, you allowed it, but you don't even know you allowed it.
No, you didn't know, right? And
Correct.
because it's easier within a marriage to apply for those loans towards the name. Like there's a lot, right? It can go on so
Yes.
much. And so we're not talking, hey, a division of duties in the household necessarily. It's because it becomes abuse. And you correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, but like when one spouse is using it to control and exert power
Yes.
over the other person through the use of money is the way you would
Exactly.
describe
Whether
it,
they're using
right?
your money or
Yeah.
withholding money, it
Uh-huh.
is power. It's all about power and control. The National Domestic Violence website has a power wheel on it, and you are correct. Financial abuse is one of the big wedges of that wheel. There's financial, mental, emotional, physical, obviously, but nobody pays attention to the financial abuse. And because I went through it, I can tell you I have a passion to help people. Don't do this. Don't sign anything to know everything. I'll probably say that more than once in this. And because I learned it the hard way, I
Yeah.
believed him. And just briefly, I mean, he went to a bank, whited my name off the deed. And in Tennessee, when you live in a rural place, you could get away with it. And this was 20 years ago, so I have no emotions attached to it anymore. And I have rebuilt my life, thank goodness. But yeah, he went to the bank, whited my name off a deed and borrowed money against the house and didn't tell me.
Wow.
It did
Yeah.
not tell me, filed bankruptcy on the IRS and didn't tell me. And I lost a beautiful 20-acre farm. And I'll tell you, that was my rock bottom end of my codependency moment where I had to make a decision. Like we just lost Tina Turner, that same decision of I will leave you even if I have nothing. I made an exit strategy. So we'll be talking about that through this today, I bet, is how, because you mentioned how people can get out of it. You can. Sometimes it's slower than you want it to be, but you can do it.
And, when we talk about the financial abuse and and we will get to the planning to get out because, it I think it's so prevalent because you gotta have money for food and gas and electricity and to live and then you have children and it's just so vital. And if you have
Yes.
been really just, kind of blockaded out from your ability to earn in feeling trapped and so dependent, it can be, I'm sure, it's an incredibly helpless feeling.
It is helpless, but it's not hopeless. And we're probably going to get into that.
Absolutely. And we are because, financial abuse can happen to anyone. And like other forms of abuse, I think many women may not even realize they're experiencing it. They certainly don't see it coming. And then kind of once it gets to that point, I think they're like, have their spouse, they have full financial control. They feel isolated and dependent. So anyway, we're going to continue talking about that. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. And in this time, please leave us a review and let us know which has been your favorite episode so far. Welcome back, listeners. Again, today I am joined by Mary Joye, and we are discussing financial abuse. And so now we're going to dive into some specific examples of financial abuse. Now, Mary, what examples of monetary abuse do you see most often, maybe in your practice or in your experiences as a mediator?
Well, I gave you an example earlier of how my ex did it to me, just borrowing money and not telling me, racking up debt. And this is what I see in my practice, mediation or counseling. I see a lot of people racking up debt because, especially in states that have equitable distribution, meaning they're doing that ratio of assets to debts. They're not supposed to do that, but seldom does anybody uphold, you're not supposed to do it for at least 2 years. It's called wasting, but it's hard to prove for the victim. It's absolutely hard because they might be
Very hard.
benefiting
It's
from
very
some of
hard,
the debt.
right?
I mean, the person might have bought 10 jet skis, but they might be using one of them. So it's kind of hard to prove that, as they also hold back documentation. They won't give you your bank account numbers. They're often, when you're going through the divorce, they will withhold documentation. You probably know that better than I do. They would rather be in contempt of court than turn in their financial affidavit. They just don't want to turn it in because they're going to get found out. So they need time. And if you are being financially abused, do not announce to someone that you're getting a divorce, because you are giving them time to hide things. Just pretend everything's okie dokie with you. Again, learned it the hard way. And I help my clients with that. Don't announce it. Don't tell them. Just let it be. They snuck up on your blind side and stole from you, from the marriage too. So you don't feel guilty about it. That old terrible guilt that says I'm doing something wrong. No, that's just an old message you probably got from somebody in your background. But yes, no,
Yeah, many women, they say, oh, I just think that I should. And I am in complete agreement with you, Mary. Like, nothing good will come of it. And I just, some cases more extreme than others,
yes.
but generally, like, how do you, I asked them, like, how do you think that conversation is going to go? And in these types of cases, particularly, it can be very detrimental to you financially if you give them any kind of
It
heads
can leave
up.
you impoverished, especially, and I will
Yes.
be gender biased here because I'm not being gender biased. The statistics are gender biased. Women are most often put in poverty situations from divorce, especially older women, who've been married forever in states with no alimony. I mean, my goodness, these women, they've never worked and they're from the cultural times where women weren't supposed to work and it was shameful to work, and they might be 75 years old. Their husband cuts them loose and they don't have any alimony. And it's horrible. Also, I see this a lot in my practice, unfortunately, is that the spouse pretends not to have any money or to be unemployed or to have lost their job while they're working under the table. They'll have a brand new house, but it'll be their parents' house. I see it so often that somebody else is providing for them. And it's just so frustrating because and especially as a mediator, you have to keep your mouth shut. As a counselor, I don't advise, but I can definitely guide as a counselor. But as a mediator, I can't say a thing other than, do you feel coerced? Do you feel like you're being coerced?
Yeah, and I want to touch back on the racking up of the debt, because that, I have not heard that from anyone really under the financial abuse as much. But it makes so much sense, now that you've said it, but because it's like, really, like you said, stealing from the marriage by incurring this debt that you had no control over, right?
Exactly. It's kind of like the IRS will give you innocent spouse relief. And I learned this from from a very wonderful attorney in Nashville. And he looked at what happened to me with the IRS and the house. And the first thing he said when he sat back, I did not go to him for a divorce. I was going to him to help me with the IRS and the bank. And he sat back and he was a really nice guy. And he said, I do divorces too. And I
So
said, but
he
he's
could
done
see
so
it
much.
clearly, right?
Right.
And which sometimes it's much easier on the outside looking in.
Yes, and he was very helpful because he was kind.
Yeah.
He wasn't being a jerk. He was actually being helpful. So realize that financial abuse may be the beginning of this trauma bond. It may be the beginning. It could be the end of how your spouse is trying to use you or abuse you. I'm telling you, financial abuse is absolutely underrated. And I wish the courts would find some equity with it where, did you know he took out this debt? No, I mean, it happens and it's awful. I mean, they'll go out and borrow $100,000 to buy a tractor, but you don't know it.
Right. Yeah, it is tough because with the law, they're like, well, it's he said, she said, and unfortunately, there isn't a lot of protection, like, innocent spouse, and that there should be. There definitely needs to be more education.
Yes, that attorney did tell me, he said, I don't care. He said, if you remarry, I don't care how much the man loves you or you love him, don't file joint taxes because you would not have owed his taxes if you didn't file jointly. So like a loan, if they take out a loan, if your signature is forged or you didn't sign it, then you do have proof that it's not you.
Correct. Now, when we are talking, and I've seen this, and I think this is, you mentioned it in the first segment about maybe your spouse just gives you cash, like as an allowance, or you have to account for the money. I've seen, through the electronic, like debit card or credit card, because they can cut it off, but they can also track you. So I know that those are conversations I've had in the past with clients, and we'll have that conversation. They'll say, yeah, what were you doing at Target? Or they have to limit the notification on their app on that card so that it's both, really.
They're stalking you. It's
They
a
are
form of stalking. Yes.
It really is. And I mean, I've certainly had clients like, I have no idea where we bank. This is the card that he's given me, and he can turn it off at any moment. And I never know. You go to the store, is it going to work or not? I know that many, many years ago, client had she went to the kids' piggy bank to get enough money for gas because he had totally cut everything off and he made plenty of money.
Yes.
And that's it. Like having to ask permission or beg for money to buy something.
That's what I mean by infantilizing it, like treating it like a child. Yes.
And yet there is like a double standard because you have the spouse who is, controlling and minimizing you, but yet they can spend whatever they want, right? And they're
Yeah.
not.
Oh, always. I've never seen that not work out that way. They might give you $1,000 a week, but they might be spending $5,000 a week. It just depends on whatever their, limit is. Oh, they can have anything they want, but you cannot have everything you want. You just can't.
Right. Only
very
if
difficult.
they let you. And that's
Only if
part of
they
that
let you.
control.
And here's another twist to that. I'm so glad you said that, Heather. Only if you let them let you. At some point, when you recognize it, you're going to have to start developing an exit strategy.
Yes, which we are going to save because that's going to till the next segment. But I also think that, I think we see a lot of behaviors, patterns in many types of abuse that we do see in financial because there's all that isolation very often, like limiting your ability to work. And many times women said he wouldn't let me work. He didn't want me to work, wouldn't let me work because they really believed he had control over whether or not you can go to work, which is kind of what you said earlier, right? You let him let you, right? You at some point you have to recognize you allowed this control to happen.
Yes.
Doesn't make not blaming the victim.
It's taking responsibility for your part in it.
Yes.
They fooled you. They stonewalled. They rolled over you like a stone. But the light bulb will come on at some point, and when it does, then that's when you have to really start paying attention to how it happened. Start looking, start digging, start stalking what they've done financially.
Well, and I think that's really important because otherwise you're going to just repeat the pattern.
Yes.
You're going to end up in exactly the same type of relationship again if you don't learn from it and learn.
Yes.
How did you play a part? Because relationships take two people, healthy or dysfunctional. And how did you show up, and what made you susceptible? What now, looking back, if you're really willing to look at yourself in this situation, so that you just don't repeat that again.
No,
I have no doubt you get out of this. You don't want to be back there.
No, you won't. It's sometimes the state will send me in the state that I live in, if a battered person, and it usually is a female, if a battered person calls 911 and there are children in the house, they will charge the victim with child endangerment and they lose their children. So they have to come to me to get their children back. It's a law that needs changing. It's rather archaic. I understand the intent, but I also see how it impoverishes people and they lose their children into foster care. It's a pretty rough dynamic. So that when I teach the class,
like failure to protect, they're saying you
yes,
failed. Yeah, and
yes,
it
and
can so
it's
backfire.
really tough. So it can backfire. So what I do, I have to usually teach 12 classes, and this is kind of like anger management in reverse, but
Okay.
it's the opposite of anger management. I'm teaching people to stand up for themselves. And those in the last 3 classes I teach, and I tell them you're going to love me and hate me simultaneously because they're all going to be about money, money, and money. It's always I make them watch Jim Cramer or CNBC or MSNBC. I watch them watch business news, whatever appeals to them, because I want them to get the education, even if they
Right.
just read it. I send them to financial websites and to television shows that deal with business, even if they're watching Shark Tank. I mean, just something to understand money, so that you
The
don't get tripped
conversations
up with
around
money.
money.
Yes,
Right. And the
that financial
words.
freedom is freedom.
It is. It absolutely is. Now, I mentioned earlier about isolating, your spouse and preventing them from work, but also sometimes the abuser might try to sabotage you if you are working and really ruin, make it difficult for you to remain at work. Have you had experience with that?
Well, personally, yes, I have. I mean, absolutely. And professionally all the time. And I think that's what makes me, I wouldn't say a better counselor, but definitely more an insightful counselor,
Mhm.
because a lot of times people say, oh, my spouse would never do that to me. I'm like, mm-hmm. I'm like,
Don't be so
mm-hmm.
sure.
Right. I see all of the red flags and they don't have any. They don't see them. So I'm
Okay.
helping them see them, not by suspicion, not by planting seeds of suspicion, because that's no good either. But educating them, because education and liberation, educating them on what the person may be doing and how to possibly look for it. Just don't blindly believe that somebody is paying car notes. If you're going through a divorce, they might not be, and they might repossess your car and you don't even know it. So, I tell people you need to start paying attention. And I hear this a lot. And this is, again, not blaming the victim, but it makes me a little prickly, because they'll say, well, I don't like talking about money. I'm like, wow, it is the very thing you need to pay rent, live, buy milk for your children, put gas in your car, just like you said earlier. It is the number one thing we all need. It doesn't buy happiness, but it does buy contentment and peace of mind and freedom. If you need a doctor, money will take you to the doctor. If you need a new car, money will get you a new car. If your children need new shoes, it'll buy you, and that is a form of happiness. So it doesn't buy happiness in totality, but it is a form of happiness to have financial freedom.
Well, freedom, because that was the word. It's freedom, and where
Yes,
you understand, and you're not under the control of another human being. You have the
exactly.
freedom to,
Yes.
to care for yourself and those you love. And it's a lot about what you're saying, the education, so that you can see it. Because we talked about that earlier. You don't know what you don't know, and we don't see what we don't want to see either. So
Correct.
sometimes, right, we don't hear what we don't want to hear sometimes. So it is, but again, learning so that you can then educate yourself and then see something that maybe before you just didn't have that perspective or that education, to now see things with a little bit more discernment as to maybe this is not good for me.
Yes.
Maybe this is a situation where I need to ask for more information, um, you know, assert myself, my independence in this relationship, because I think that, I know you, Mary, when you're talking with an individual, you get a sense pretty clearly if that's what it is, just like with me when we're
Yes.
meeting with potential clients.
We
However,
do
I
the
say,
same
wow,
thing in that way. We
yeah,
do the
we do.
same.
It's like, that doesn't really sound normal. You might need to, you know, have a look. It's very easy for us, but I think for women listening today, you know, start asking questions. Then you're going to know real quick if this is intentional and trying to, control you through money, with some basic questions that you ask. Because if you're in a relationship that has mutual love and respect, and they really want to take care of you, which is maybe what they say, I've got it, I want to take care of you. Yeah, if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, I am out of luck, because all this stuff you've worked for and said you're trying to help us, I have no way of knowing where anything is or how to take care of them.
Yes. Ask the right questions and listen to their answers and trust your intuition.
Indeed. Well, we are going to take a quick break, listeners, for the much awaited third segment on how to make a plan to escape. In the meantime, please take a moment to subscribe and review our podcast, which is available on most major podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple, Google, and iHeartRadio. We will be right back. We are back from our last break. And again, today I'm joined by Mary Joye. Now, before the break, we discussed financial abuse and some examples to be aware of. And now we're going to discuss how to escape financial abuse, because this is really what's so important. Right, Mary?
Yeah, it's the most important thing. It is how to fix this, not just to
Right. And how
complain,
to
but to
get
fix it.
out, how to fix
Yes.
it and get out. Because
Yes.
if you are listening to this and you are feeling hopeless and trapped and like no options, that's what we got to help you understand. There are.
There are.
And a lack of financial resource is the main reason women stay in a marriage. And this type of abuse, though, is all about power and control. Because, yes, very often, hey, there's one income and you're thinking, we've got children, all these things. I don't know how it's going to work otherwise. But, because without access to money or the ability to earn for themselves, you can become 100% dependent on yourself for
Yes.
everything. So, Mary, let's have some tips from you on, well, I guess how to begin the plan, and then we're going to talk about, gaining that sense of independence. But let's talk
Okay.
about a plan. Like how do you escape this?
Well, you're going to be able to tell I'm a songwriter now, I think, in rhymes, and it annoys me sometimes, but that's how we remember lyrics too. They stick in our head. So the number one thing you need to do, and it sounds so ridiculous, but you have to make a decision to find provision. Make a decision to find provision. It starts with a decision. Everything you do in life, everything starts with a decision. Everything. Yes, things happen by chance. I agree with that. But still, you're making decisions in the moment. So you've got to make a decision to find provision. We just lost Tina Turner not long ago. And if there's anything we learned from her life, her films, the stuff she never wanted to talk about, I don't like talking about it either. You notice I glance right over it. But she left Ike Turner with 36 cents and a borrowed hotel room that she had to pay back later. And she worked in horrible Vegas showrooms, not the nice places like the lounges and things. She had to
Yeah,
live on her
cabaret.
friend's couch. And I did some time on my friend's couch. You know what? It may not be what you want, but if you make a decision, my brother was an attorney, and a friend of his was so kind to me during that time. He wasn't a divorce attorney, but he said, never stay with someone because of money, and never be scared to leave because of money, because you're going to just throw your life down the drain. Just make a decision to start over. And he was so right. And it was so true. And it's simple, but it's not easy. A decision is simple, but it's not easy to do it. The exit strategy is what in domestic violence, we don't tell people to just leave. Because if
Right.
they just leave, like in another state that I've lived in, if the person just leaves their home, they forfeit that home after 6 months of being gone. And their neighbors can prove it. They can just subpoena their neighbors and say, yeah, that she or he took off, or it's awful. So you have to know the laws. That's why I tell people you need an attorney to see what can happen to you. That's usually my way to intro them into you. You are part of an exit strategy in the way I counsel.
Yes, because we say this all the time. You don't know what you don't know, and you're making a decision that you're going to change. So that
Yeah.
should include a decision to educate yourself so that
Yes.
now you can do so in the right way.
Yes.
Because
Education is liberation. I went back to school at 45 years of age. That was my exit strategy. And my exit strategy took about 3.5 years because I was in graduate school.
Mhm. And so, like with that, because I know you said earlier that it may not be as fast as you want it to be.
No.
And so that's going to vary for everybody, as to what they can tolerate, what they can handle, what type of support or network they have,
Mm-hmm.
that allows them. But, you can, I mean, how do you do that? If you're like, I have no money or access to shared money, I don't know what to do, Mary. Like, what's my first step?
It's really awful. I help people with this. I tell them to sit back and think about anyone they know, even a family member they might be angry with that may have some resources for them. Anything and anywhere. What are their skill set? You don't have to go back to graduate school like I did. Sometimes you might have a skill set that you can use right. I mean, let's not forget Martha Stewart started an empire by baking one cake. She was a caterer in
I know. I
Connecticut.
mean, right. In her house, in her
Yes,
kitchen.
in her house, in her kitchen, going to other people's houses and cooking in their kitchens. So you can start literally from scratch, like Martha Stewart. You can scratch it. I mean, whatever it is. Like I could write. I wrote for every newspaper and everybody I could find to put myself through school. I had to go through, you might have to put yourself in debt for a little while. I had to borrow money to go back to school. I did not want to borrow money, but I had to. So you just start looking at your skill set, your education, any networking. Unfortunately, with abusers, they usually do isolate you. So your network might be damaged, but it's not broken. I have so many domestic violence victims believe, well, they're not my friends. My husband chased everyone away. Don't be so
Yeah.
surprised. when you announce to some of them that you've made the break, they're like, oh, finally, I was so worried about you. And before
And
we
same
go
with
any further
family
with
too,
that,
right,
if you're in
Mary?
imminent danger, please do just leave. I mean, just
Exactly.
leave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But right, Mary, because sometimes you might feel that you've really broken, burned that bridge with even family members, but it was more to do with you and your husband and that person. And if they know you are leaving or trying to get away, it might be different than they think.
Oh,
Do you
yes,
agree?
you'd be surprised you'd be surprised at the supportive people you don't find and the supportive people you do find. And I think that's just part of even a normal divorce without abuse in it. Your friends are gonna change. Some friends, there's so many comedy shows made about that. They choose a side. It just happens. But
Yeah.
you'd be surprised if you tap back into some of the support systems you used to have, no, however great or small. Whatever that may be, start looking and do look at your skill set. That's when it really helps to talk to a counselor too, not just legal counsel, but to talk to a counselor, because we help people with career counseling. We help people start from the bottom. I mean, we help high school students pick majors. We can also help people with major disappointments in their life reinvent themselves. And I've done it. Other people have done it. Certainly, I'm not alone in that. And many, many people now. I mean, look at COVID. How many people had to reinvent? That was a form of financial abuse that was out of everyone's control to many people, but we're all finding our way and we still are. So we've had an exit strategy from COVID. I mean, it's kind of like that. It's a financial abuser affects your life like COVID. It just comes on out of the blue. And then you have to extract and extricate and find out and educate yourself and find out what way is the best way out. Do the next best thing. I don't like that term, the next right thing. Do the next best thing for yourself. And sometimes that might be just laying down and taking a nap and brainstorming. That might be the next best thing for you.
It's true. And you're right, getting yourself maybe some time, some
Mhm.
peace to think about this. And in the world we live in today, there is no shortage of opportunities and people who can make a living, not just a little bit online, and who
Yes,
have something to offer. And the internet allows you to offer it to the whole world,
it
whatever that
does.
skill set. So there's so many opportunities if they were to meet with someone like you, brainstorming on like, because they might, I think be at a very low place of self-esteem and
Yes.
insecurity after being in this situation. It's hard to think, what do I have to offer of value? How in the world am I going to go out and earn any money? So I think that's really where meeting with somebody who is objective and who can really kind of understand what you have to offer maybe help create that.
True. And I just had a memory come back, and I will tell you, and I help a lot of people do this. You can start with eBay. I can hear this. I always can hear like somebody out there listening who's going to dispute this. They're going to say, "Oh, you can't just go do that." I'm serious. Open your closet.
Yep.
There's eBay. You can stay in that abusive marriage. You can open up an eBay account. He or she's going to be out of the house for at least an hour. You can list a lot of stuff in an hour on eBay, and I certainly did. I went out in my barn and found a brand new set of John Deere tractor blades, and I sold them for $60. I mean, just there is stuff around. I'm serious. Just start at the bottom. Literally, there's
Right. Well,
things
and
in your
starting
house you can
somewhere
sell.
because you're making that
Yes.
decision, like you said,
You
Mary,
make the
to start.
decision, you're going to find it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have something in our brain called reticular formation, which means once you make a decision, your brain will guide you to it subconsciously. And it's kind of like I tell people, and I know you all can relate to this, if you want a white car of a certain model, that's all you're going to see on the road. You're only going to see that kind of car. It's kind of like if you think about a pizza all day long, you're going to buy one by the end of the day. So what you think about, your brain's going to lead you to it because you'll be at a stop sign and you go, "Oh, there's a pizza place right there."
Yeah.
Well, the same is true in a trauma bond situation. Once you make that decision, nothing's going to change. Not your emotions, not your feelings, nothing. But your brain is seeking a sense of safety. You've made a decision. So it's going to start seeking a way out, kind of like you've been acquiescing to another person. And that means like, flowing like water to another person's stream, but you're going to find your own streams of income. And I mean streams. Don't ever rely on one stream of income. That's just for anybody in or out of abuse. Don't ever rely on, I think we all learned that in COVID too. It's nice to have, sidelines or things like that. And there's things you can sell on Amazon. I sold textbooks back. I mean, whatever I could, whatever I could. That's how I hid it for a long time without him
Let's
even
talk
knowing
about
I
how
was
to
doing
hide
it.
it. How do they find a safe place to hide or, keep this money from this stuff? I mean, luckily, you can sell things online. The money comes in online. But what
Right.
would you suggest for a
Well,
woman
that comes in online, but you have a separate PayPal account they might not know about, or a
Right.
separate Square account, or you have baseboards in your house, or, whatever it is. In Tennessee, they have Tennessee, because that's where I went to school. A woman that I knew there, and it wasn't somebody that I counseled, so I can tell. She used to go to Kroger, the Kroger, as they say. She'd go to Kroger and write a check for $20 over because her husband always looked at that. He looked at how much she was spending, but he didn't look at the receipts. So if you go to the grocery store 3 times a week, and this was a long time ago, and you're getting $60 a week, and you add that up, and then she was stashing the cash. They call it rat holing in Tennessee, but it's cash stashing. And it gave her comfort, even though it took her forever to exit. It took the anxiety away. It took some of that trauma bonding away. It gave the more she accumulated, the less anxiety she had. So like I said, exit strategies can take a day, a week, or years, but whatever it is, goodness, just make the decision to start. Even if it's just putting $5 in a box, start. It will change your brain.
That is such great advice because I think in it, you have a plan and so you also know, okay, I'm not hopeful. Hopefully this gives you a sense of hope because you're working your plan
Yes.
and you have that plan to change your life and get out. And I think that you're absolutely right. And no amount is too small. It's just starting.
Starting. It's like
Taking
lighting a
that step.
candle. It just,
Yeah.
when we light a candle, we just instantly feel better. It will give you the same physiological response of lighting a candle, like, it's only $3, but it's the start.
Right. It's yours and he doesn't know. So now you have
Yes.
something that you can then build on.
Yes.
And I think that is it's just so important because you're also, wouldn't you agree, Mary, that, and you'll be able to explain, I just know, I feel like once you make that decision and then you reinforce it by doing it, it's going to begin to have an effect
Yes.
physiologically on you. Don't you think that's
Oh,
going to give
yes.
you
You're
more
going to, yeah.
hope and
You're going
more
to crave
maybe,
saving.
yeah, like I have a way out and I
Yes.
think that would help, especially if you're in a position where, you are maybe depressed and you're scared and
Mhm.
it can help really change feeling.
Yes, I so much agree. And hopefully this will help someone out there too. I don't know the exact amount, but somewhere around $27 a day. If you don't spend $27 a day by the end of the year, you will have about $10,000. So if you're having an exit strategy and you're buying Starbucks and you're going to retail therapy, put back that junk that you would buy and put it in the box and go, wow, by the end of this year, if I save about $27 a day, which is not that hard for many, many people, it's hard for some, but not for all. And so
Right.
even if it's just $10 a day, you've saved $5,000 in 1 year, 365 days, 52 weekends.
Yep. And that's just giving yourself that freedom.
Yes, freedom.
Sure.
This is all about losing their control and gaining your freedom.
Absolutely. Well, we have reached the end of our show, and thank you so much to my guest this week, Mary Joye. Check out her new online course on Daily Own called From Codependent to Independent. And of course, we will provide the link in the show notes. But lastly, Mary, before we go, can you impart on our listeners what you have learned about divorce and guiding women throughout your career?
Yes, everything we talked about today. And then this again, I'm going to say it one last time. Don't sign anything until you know everything. And that's what Heather is for. Thank you, Heather.
Oh, Mary, thank you so much. This has been a great show, and I know that it is going to help so many of our listeners. And if you or someone you know is going through a divorce or thinking about it, of course, reach out to us at FloridaWomen'sLawGroup.com or join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. The link will be below in the episode description. And also, as always, please leave us a 5-star review if you found value from this episode. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Women Winning Divorce. My goal is to elevate your life and the way you are thinking so that you are best equipped to win at life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe so you automatically get my new shows every week. And I would love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social and join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. We welcome your comments and suggestions. We want to bring you content that helps move your life forward. Women Winning Divorce is the place for an elevated conversation on how women can thrive during times of adversity in order to live their best life.